My dad made his first $1 million in the 1990s. And so today I want to tell you a story about how he made that $1 million. In telling that story, I hope that it can be a constant reminder of what it actually takes to become a successful entrepreneur. So who's my dad? My dad is this simple human being. He was born in China in 1948 from very humble beginnings. He did not come from money at all. And when I asked my dad whether he felt like entrepreneurship was his calling, he would always say, no, it's not. It's something that I had to do because it put food on the table. He would tell me stories of how at a very young age he would take scrap metal, heat it up, bend it, buy oil, and put the oil in the metal, which would now look like a really small tube, and he would make his own lighters. He would go up to people who were smoking cigarettes and try to sell it to them. And this was when he was really young, like 10, 11, 12 years old. He was thinking, I need money. I need to live, I need to survive, and this is how I'm going to do it. It wasn't until he was around 17, 18 that he got his first job. And it was what we would traditionally call a blue-collar job, right? Because he never graduated high school. So he got working in a steel factory. He was recognized for his hard work, and his bosses allowed him to go to night school where he learned a little bit of mechanical engineering and physics and all that. And he became a really respected operator of the machines at the steel factory. So much so that by the time he was in his mid-20s, he was promoted to the chief of the factory line, and he had about 100 people working under him. That day he had taken a half a day off at work, and it wasn't until he showed up to work that his colleagues started congratulating him, and he was like, what for? He didn't even know. And he rose up to the job, making a glorious 40 RMB a month, which is about $6 a month. This was in the mid-1970s. And it wasn't until around that time also when some of his friends who used to work with him at the steel factory, who had gone to Hong Kong, would come back and visit family regularly. And he noticed that every time they came back, they had all of these gifts that would cost a lot of money. And so he wondered, like, how did they make so much money in Hong Kong? When his bosses were talking to him, they were pretty much like, hey, this steel company is a state-run company. If you want to get promoted, you have to join the political party of China, the Communist Party. And my dad didn't want to do that. He wanted to be recognized based on his merit. If that's not going to be the reason why he's going to get promoted, then he'd rather do something else. And that's when he started the process of going to Hong Kong, in which he eventually did in 1979. As soon as he got to Hong Kong, he was making 40 yuan a day, but he had to start from the beginning again. He was the new guy. He was the guy from China. And a lot of people didn't respect him. He was having noodles at this restaurant, and he would just order plain noodles with extra soup. The waiter would come with the bowl of soup, slam it on the table, and be like, hey, here you go buy an apartment. That was the moment when he decided that that's exactly what he would do. You have to get to a point where the people who hate you respect you for what you've done. And that was his driving factor. From 1979 to 1989, he saved every single penny. He lived in bunk beds. He had a roommate. When he was 40, in 1989, he looked at the people around him and realized that the people that owned business, they weren't smarter than him. They were just normal people. And a lot of them were from China. And so he said to himself, if they can do it, I can do it. And by then, he had already been recognized for his quality of the work that he does. He managed to talk to a customer of one of his previous employers, and that customer actually said, if you start your own company, we will give you orders. He noticed that one of his friends had a factory that wasn't running from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning. And so he borrowed the factory. At that time, obviously, you would pay all the cost of operation and all that. His first few orders was working from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. for weeks at a time to complete his first order. And that's how he got paid in the beginning. Eventually, he chose to buy a factory instead of rent one because he'd rather pay a fixed amount of money to the bank than pay money to a landlord, because he recognized that when landlords look at you and know that you're making money, what are they going to do? They're going to raise your rent. He got paid based on volume. As long as the machines were operating and creating those widgets, it was like printing money. In those 10 years, he made enough money to retire the whole family in Canada. And so in terms of lessons, here are the biggest ones. Number one, he always over-delivered. People were always impressed with the quality of my dad's work, no matter what he did. And even after moving to Canada, he would be the go-to person in his social circle for things like fixing a fence or painting a wall or fixing a lawnmower, and he did it for free. And so the first lesson that I learned is he over-delivers on everything that he does. The second lesson that I learned is he's kind. If he's got a friend that needs help, he helps. He provides value for free without expecting anything in return. As long as you're respectful and nice about it and say thank you, he will help. My dad also has a very clear sense of what is number one to him and what is number 2 and 3 and 4. And to him, his family is number one. He made the decision to close down his business in order to give his family, me, my sister, my mom, a better life abroad. And that's exactly what he did. And he didn't look back. My dad always would say that we need hearts that are the size of an ocean. If someone wrongs you, you don't need to be upset about it. You just need to take it as a learning experience and not have that happen to you again. He recognizes that he's had a very smooth life, and that though he's been cheated on in business a few times, that they were never backbreaking, and he wouldn't bat an eye. My dad would never let setbacks hold him back from getting the job done. And finally, my dad doesn't like to show his wealth. He's lived humbly his whole life, and frankly, growing up, I didn't even realize that we had any money, because it just felt like I grew up in a normal family, like a happy family, but very modest, very normal. We would still use coupons when we go to Superstore. We don't buy any brand name things. My mom would still always look for sales before she went to buy anything. In my mind, anyone that has lived a life like my dad has done so spectacularly. But in his mind, he's just a guy that's tried his best to provide for his family. He did what he could, and it turned out a lot better than how he thought it would. And I am now feeling the benefits of that life. And so I'm thankful. I truly am.